And we're back in the car on a Monday like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday afternoon here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So today is another one of those movie-themed episodes, but a discussion of a particular moment in time where a lot of different things were occurring at once back then. And it's the sort of film where we look back on it with a little bit of sadness because the lead actor has passed, and not that long ago. It's a film that was IP, an enormous box office success with a high rewatchability factor. And it featured a supporting performer who had only recently become the world's biggest movie star. The film is Joel Schumacher's 1995, released on this day, June 16th, 1995, Batman Forever. Now, originally, Batman Forever was supposed to star Michael Keaton, who had done the Burton, well, it was just two films. Tim Burton directed Batman 89, of course, with Jack, and Batman 1992 with, speaking of Jack, Michelle Pfeiffer, his co-star, one of his co-stars from The Witches of Eastwick, and Danny DeVito as the Penguin. Batman Returns was a movie I saw on its opening day, and I didn't like it. I appreciate it more now. I think that I was wanting it to be a different movie than it was. This seems to be a common theme with my younger self, dismissing films I recently talked about, such as The Fisher King from 91, such as Grand Canyon, also 91, because they weren't what I wanted them to be, and I didn't allow the movie to simply work on me. It's a pro tip. Try to leave your expectations at the door. Let the movie work its magic, assuming that it in fact has magic. Don't carry too much in the way of expectations. Don't try to force the movie into being something that it is not. Batman Returns is brilliantly orchestrated and executed by Tim Burton. The story's not really there, but I appreciate the artistry and the staging of some of the large-scale sequences. You look back at it now, you say, Jesus, that's pretty fucking impressive what Burton was able to achieve here. The movie was way better than I thought it was. Well, Batman Forever, it is a snapshot of a special time. And 1995, as I've said, is it's the weakest year of the greatest decade Hollywood ever had, the 90s. But it doesn't mean that there weren't important moments, touchstone movies, and I don't mean Disney touchstone, and that you had these moments in time that are difficult to explain to people who weren't there. But if you can rewind the clock to back then, Jim Carrey, the previous year, 1994, he almost literally came from nowhere. He had been in a number of movies. People like me knew who he was. We saw the movie Once Bitten. You know, there's a segment of Generation X we were very familiar with Jim Carrey, but almost everyone else did not know who this guy was. Is that the white guy from In Living Color? Everyone was saying the same thing the previous year when Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the first one, was being, we were watching TV ads. Is that the white guy from In Living? Yeah, that's the same guy. No, that's the guy from Once Bitten, a movie that I'd already seen 20 times at that point. But Jim Carrey did not have he didn't really have a movie career. He'd been in some movies with Clint Eastwood. Clint cast him in the Deadpool. He loved his stand-up. Clint wasn't really making comedies at that time, although Jim had a small role in Pink Cadillac. He's not really even a featured supporting performer. But Jim Carrey came out of nowhere. Ace Ventura was a huge hit, despite getting just trashed by critics. Trashed. Owen Gleiberman, who later became a huge fan of Jim Carrey, described him as Ace Ventura comes across like an escaped mental patient impersonating a game show host. He gave the film an F. An F for fuck you, this movie's terrible, I guess. Critics trashed it. Film was a big hit. The Mask got better reviews by critics. That's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. That was a monster hit. And then at the end of the year, his buddy Jeff Daniels, they make Dumb and Dumber with his future bride, that is Jim, future bride Lauren Holly. Enormous hit. So, as Dumb and Dumber was, I don't think Dumb and Dumber had come out yet. there was a front page in the Daily News, New York Daily News, that is. It was a picture of Big Jim. I don't know if it was a screenshot from The Mask or from Ace Ventura. That I don't remember. But basically, it was announcing the casting. There had been talk of Robin Williams playing the Riddler in the third Batman film, and I don't know if he was ever approached. I feel like Robin talked about this, but I don't know if he ever had an offer and turned it down. I don't know. But it was announcing Jim took the role of the Riddler for $15 million. And in a mostly pre-social media, well, all pre-social media, but mostly where everything was not yet on the internet, it was huge news that Hollywood's newest superstar was going to play essentially the lead villain in the newest Batman film. And even if I personally didn't think Batman Returns was that great, awareness was through the roof. Excitement for the film was sky high. And so as the movie, went into production, and you heard stories that Jim Carrey wasn't getting along with Tommy Lee Jones. A lot of times these stories are not true. They're all crap. But unfortunately, that was true. And this was not Jim acting like a lunatic like he did Man on the Moon a couple of years later, where Jerry Lawler, for real, wanted to stuff him into a garbage can and lock the lid. Tommy Lee Jones just didn't get him. He didn't get Jim Carrey. He didn't think he was funny, I guess, but he just didn't like his process. Some actors are very straightforward. They're very kind of sort of standard in terms of how they prepare for scenes and how they execute scenes when the cameras are rolling. Jim was somebody who always loved to ad lib, and most filmmakers would encourage him to go with the moment because we might catch lightning in a bottle. And that's something that happened in films such as Ace Ventura, such as The Mask, to a lesser extent, The Truman Show, but certainly in Man on the Moon as well, as I say, years later. But Tommy Lee Jones, they just didn't click. And there's a moment during the film where Jim is clearly ad-libbing, and Tommy Lee is keeping it together, but he looks like he wants to punch him in the face. And, given that he plays Harvey Dent, Harvey Two-Face, he could have done it, and they could have kept it in the film. But you could see Tommy almost looking at him like, kid, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? But he doesn't actually say it. So in the run-up to the film's release, we saw trailers. And not surprisingly, because this was now the big star in Hollywood, almost overshadowing Val, the first trailer I saw, Jim Carrey's the focus. They're focusing on him. They feel that he's who is going to guarantee that the seats are filled on opening night. Now, where I was going with the Michael Keaton thing, Michael Keaton was supposed to play Batman in this film. As sort of silly and goofy as the version that we all saw in theaters, it wouldn't have worked with Michael Keaton, because Michael Keaton can do comedy. We've seen it. He's naturally a very funny guy, but his interpretation of Batman it didn't fit this material. I don't even know why they bothered asking him to come back for a third film when it was so clearly not suited to him. So he supposedly walked off the set either first day, second day, I don't know what, it was something like that. Nowadays we would know for 100% sure. Oh, he walked off the set after having a breakfast of eggs and corned beef hash. There would be something stupid like that. So he left, and Val Kilmer stepped in. It just happened to work out that way, that he had a little bit of a time in his schedule that he was able to do it. And Val's career had dipped a little bit, seemingly at that time, because he did a film with Kim Basinger, The Real McCoy, where some people were excited. It bombed. The movie that he did in '92 called Thunderheart, it wasn't that good. It was a film I really wanted to like, and I didn't think it was that good. So his career was not, well, obviously he'd had Tombstone, duh. But The Real McCoy kind of hurt his career a little bit. And even though people were buzzing like crazy about Tombstone, he wasn't going to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination that year. Films released in '93, because that was maybe the greatest individual category in the history of the Oscars. I actually read an article, I think it was in Esquire, arguing Best Supporting Actor for films released in '93 was the best category ever. You had Pete Postlethwaite in The Name of the Father, Ralph Fiennes, Schindler's List, the eventual winner Tommy Lee Jones for The Fugitive, the guy who should have won, in my opinion, John Malkovich for In the Line of Fire, and the last nominee was Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. A lot of people thought that he should have won. Many people thought, how did Rafe not win the Oscar? How did Malkovich not win the Oscar? And then you had other incredible supporting performances from that year, including Christopher Reeve in Remains of the Day. It just wasn't in the cards. Sometimes in the movie business, it comes down to who's available when. And Michael Keaton leaving when he did, Val happened to be available, and they got him. Now, there's been a lot of talk of late, many of you know this, that Joel Schumacher, long before he passed, I mean, we don't know exactly what happened 30 years ago, but Joel Schumacher had a preferred cut of Batman Forever, which was less gimmicky, less silly. I don't know if I would say, because I haven't seen it, closer in tone to the first two Burton films, but it goes deeper into Bruce Wayne and Batman. It gets into a little Christopher Nolan territory with the psychology of all of it. A man dressing up as a giant bat, you start going into that. They don't really go into it in the version of the movie that we all saw. And you can't really blame the studio. They're just trying to get as many people into seats, make as much money as possible. It's not that you don't want to make a good movie, but the line between art and commerce, when it is a summer blockbuster, it's leaning more towards commerce. And the famous quote, and a great quote, it's so accurate about Hollywood, you have to make Top Gun before you make Rain Man. And if they're both summer movies, you got to make them both. You can't risk something like a Rain Man at the wrong time of year, at least not back then, because if it backfires, you're probably, no matter who you are, you're probably out of a job. You're going to get fired. So Val stepped into the role, and the kind of irony is that as much as Val Kilmer can be funny, I would say that he's even a more serious actor than Michael Keaton, and yet here he was dealing with this sort of lighthearted, brightly colored story of Batman kind of starting a romance with Nicole Kidman's sort of horny doctor, I guess. I mean, like, that character was completely absurd, I thought. Great name, though. Chase Meridian. Great name. There's just a lot of stuff in the movie where you scratch your head, the way they completely kind of ruin. There's a lot of stuff in there that you could have almost done without. I like Jim Carrey's performance, and Val does the best he can with the material. You can see him trying to go darker than the story is allowing him to. Chris O'Donnell, another actor I liked, a million years ago, he supposedly was interested in one of my screenplays. Didn't work out, obviously. Otherwise, you would have known about me through a different pathway than this. But I was entertained. When I saw Batman Forever, I saw it opening day in theaters. I was not disappointed. I didn't walk out of the theater thinking, oh, this was a missed opportunity. I really wanted them to explore the psyche of Bruce Wayne. I didn't give a shit. I was 21. I wanted them to see a big brassy, blockbuster, action, fantasy Batman movie. And that's what the movie gave me. So I can say to you, and be honest, Batman Returns is a better movie than Batman Forever. But Batman Forever is way more entertaining because it gives more of what the audience wants. You get to see Val do, cool shit, looking good, and Jim Carrey do Jim Carrey stuff. But also the character, it makes sense. It's a similar character, at least in terms of how the MCU presented, to Electro. It's somebody who didn't necessarily start out as a terrible guy, but kind of got twisted along the way, industrial accident, whatever the case might be. But I think the character of Edward Nygma, it's good. And like Jim didn't coast. He got paid a lot of money, and you could see the gears turning, and you could see him straining and trying to wring as much out of the material as he can. And the critical reception was somewhat muted. It didn't get as good reviews as the first, the Burton films. There were a lot of critics that appreciated that this film is not trying to, reinvent the wheel. They're just looking to entertain people, and the actors all do the best they can with material. This is not going to ever be Oscar-winning kind of stuff. But I mentioned before about, and I've talked about films being products of their time, and how this movie in particular, it is a specific time. The mid-1990s. The internet it existed, but it was nothing like it would become a short time later. And there was still a lot of old school marketing that was done, a lot of music video tie-ins with big summer blockbusters. And for example, one thing that helped Terminator 2, which was 4 years before this, do even better at the box office was the fact that Guns N' Roses contributed heavily to the soundtrack. And Arnold, because the thing with Arnold Schwarzenegger, you see him now, he's an old guy, whatever. He's funny, foobar, kind of playing off of his own image. But Arnold was somebody who understood how to market himself. He understood intrinsically there are certain things that may seem silly, you do it anyway. And Arnold was asked, would you like to take part in music video for the song You Could Be Mine, which was a Guns N' Roses. It ended up being an enormous hit for them. It would have been a hit without the tie-in to the movie, but using it in the movie, and it's in one scene, like 15 minutes into the film, and you hear the song for about 30 seconds. It's whatever, but that's normal stuff. But Arnold immediately agreed to appear with Guns N' Roses in character as the T-800 that he plays in the world of, well, more than that movie, obviously. And the music video was an enormous success. And guaranteed it got more people interested in seeing Terminator 2. We don't know by percentage, we're taking a guess. But that's the sort of cross promotion that Hollywood, MTV, remember they didn't have MTV Movie Awards. That was not something that happened in a vacuum. There was always a connection, and not just because Whitney Houston bouncing back and forth between movies and TV later, Jennifer Lopez. It's just the sort of synergy, the alchemy that exists between music and movies. We talk about great composers. I mentioned John Williams yesterday with regards to The Witches of Eastwick. So it's not a composer. It's an old school soundtrack where you have a lot of different songs playing, and maybe you have an orchestral score as well, because the first Batman, the Burton film in '89, you had actual songs by Prince, some of which are really clever and, very catchy. But then you had Danny Elfman's sensational main theme from that film, which I would argue is still the best theme from any Batman movie. And other than John Williams with OG Superman, it's the best main theme of any DC film that I'm familiar with. So with this in mind, Joel Schumacher was looking for a song to use in the world of the film, but something that he could do, because Schumacher was very canny and very heady. And he had a lot of respect for James Cameron, and he didn't maybe verbalize this at the time, but I guarantee you he was thinking, I need something like what Jim and Arnold did with Terminator 2 and with Guns N' Roses. I need something like that. And many people who know of the song, Kiss from a Rose by Seal, I assumed, and I didn't know this until I looked it up, and I wasn't even looking it up, I was looking up something else. I assumed that Seal prepared that song for this movie. And I mean, why would I not assume that? Because I'd never heard of it. And all of a sudden, people were going crazy about, oh my God, this song by Seal is incredible. Now, Seal was already a star. He had a song in 1990 called Crazy, which also kind of came out of nowhere. And that was a very distinctive, unique, different sound than we were used to circa 1990. It marked him as, well, this is not like every other musical talent. This guy is different. And he had this song called Kiss from a Rose on an album which came out, and it didn't really do that well. It undersold the rest of his catalog, but Joel Schumacher heard it and said, I think this song is incredible. I don't know what's wrong with people, why this hasn't caught on, radio airplay. I don't get this. This song is phenomenal. So he met with Seal. I'd love to use it. And then when people connected to the production heard the song, they all came to the same conclusion. This is a #1 hit waiting to happen. This is a global phenomenon. What's wrong with people? Maybe they just need to be exposed to this tune. They shot the music video. They tied it into the film and, scenes from the movie in the music video. And when I tell you, it wasn't as big as Michael Jackson's Thriller a little over a decade earlier, but it was close. It was a bigger hit on MTV than even, I believe, Terminator 2 and Guns N' Roses. I mean, but you were talking very, very small degrees. It definitely got people to see Batman Forever, who maybe weren't really that interested in the Burton films and weren't even planning to see it. But the way that the scenes from the movie were presented, the music video was gorgeous. Seal seeming to interact with Jim Carrey and Val and Tommy Lee. It was perfect. And the film was a massive box office hit. And as I say, the critical reception was a little bit muted. There were some critics who absolutely loved it, like Peter Travers in Rolling Stone was a huge fan of the film. But a lot of critics just They thought the film didn't go deep enough. Roger Ebert, I believe, gave it a thumbs up, but he was disappointed because he felt that Val was ready to give more, and the story didn't let him do what he wanted. Ebert wanted more Batman. He wanted more of the psychological stuff. And the film, other than a brief moment, it doesn't go there. But I walked out of the theater satisfied. I had seen a terrific summer blockbuster. It did what I hoped it would. It gave Jim, opportunities to do his thing and develop an interesting character. And, Val was really great. He was, I don't just mean as Batman, just in general. It's so sad that not only that he's gone, but that the last many years of his life had to have been a constant struggle, that he was always in pain, his throat was always raw, and it always was hurting. It's terrible. But we can remember him when he was young, when he was at his peak. And unfortunately, his peak was very narrow. There are certain people whose careers don't really make sense. And in a weird way, Brad Pitt's career doesn't really make sense because of somebody who is on the exalted level of movie star. And obviously, he's also a terrific Oscar-winning producer. Brad Pitt has had a lot of films which way underperformed expectation. And somehow, he was still Brad Pitt. Val Kilmer didn't have that much rope. Val Kilmer's prime was really narrow. It was right at this moment. In the same year of 95, he had Batman Forever, and he had Heat. And he is great in the movie Heat. You can't really keep up with Pacino and De Niro, or even Jon Voight for that matter. But Val brings so much to that film and to the character that he plays, Chris. It's Ashley Judd's husband in the world of the film. Unfortunately, he did Ghost in the Darkness next, a script which I've read. It's a fantastic screenplay. It somehow got lost in translation. The movie sucks. It's terrible. You have Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas in the mid-90s and a great true story about lions attacking an encampment when guys are trying to build a bridge. Not a bridge. They're trying to build a train. I think a train bridge or something like that. The movie should have worked. It didn't. It was horrible. And his career didn't really... It kind of... I mean, The Saint was a hit, but there were some issues with him on set. Supposedly he was a pain in the ass. And another problem was he did Island of Dr. Moreau, and he made some enemies on that shoot. That also came out in 96. He did it because he wanted to work with Brando. He idolized Brando. Brando was kind of a dick to him. It put Val in a lousy mood, and he quarreled with the replacement filmmaker. They fired Richard Stanley, the original filmmaker who Val had championed for and really liked. They brought in John Frankenheimer, an old pro whose work I love. He did Seconds. He did the original Manchurian Candidate. But he was just a company man, and Val just didn't get along with him. They almost came to blows. I mean, you can't do that. You can't do that. And in later years, Val talked about how he wished that whole experience, he wished he hadn't taken the role, but that I didn't behave to the standards that I should have held for myself, and that's on me. And I'm really sorry that all of that bad stuff happened. I shouldn't have gotten in Frankenheimer's face. It was just all bad. But Val was a great star, a fantastic actor who just happened to look the way he did, matinee idol looks. It is unfortunate that his prime was so short as a matinee idol, as a leading man, and it's unfortunate that he got sick already 13, 14 years. He had been sick for 13 years before he passed. But Batman Forever, we look at that snapshot, that moment in time where he was just about the biggest star in Hollywood, and he had global box office #1 along for the ride in Jim Carrey. And Tommy Lee, even though he had recently won an Oscar, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Harvey Dent just doesn't have that much to do in the world of Batman Forever, and neither does Nicole Kidman. She looks spectacular, but there's really not much for her to do other than look spectacular and make goo-goo eyes at Val Kilmer's Batman / Bruce Wayne. 30 years ago today saw the release of Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, starring Val Kilmer, Chris O'Donnell, Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman, and a whole host of really interesting supporting performers, many of whom just get lost in the shuffle with shit blowing up real good. And obviously Seal's incredible, hard-rocking Kiss from a Rose, which I believe was the biggest hit of 1995. And dollars-wise, I think that Batman Forever was either the second or third biggest hit of 1995. I'm pretty sure that Toy Story, the original Toy Story, was from that year. I think that was the biggest hit of the year. Apollo 13 also tore up the box office. But Batman Forever, incredibly, turns 30 years old today. A moment in time that can never be replicated. This has been episode 566 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Monday afternoon here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, the bat signal is not a beeper. Peace.